When we hear the word joy, most of us already have pictures in our minds. It might look like that laughter around the table. It might sound like familiar voices or music that lifts the heart. It might be found in moments of rest or in achievement, or in the simple relief that comes when something hard finally eases, or you get the all clear from a medical concern. Joy can be loud and celebratory, but it can also be quiet, tender, almost fragile. So where do we expect to find joy? Do we look for it in the people we love? In places that feel safe or familiar? In success, security, or the sense that life is finally falling into place? Do we expect joy to only come when circumstances improve, when pressure lifts, when grief fades, when things return to how we wish they were? And what happens when joy seems harder to find or to experience? When the places we thought might hold it actually feel empty? When familiar comforts don't quite work? When joy feels like something other people have, while we stand slightly outside the circle? Advent gently invites us to pay attention to these questions. As we know, Advent has been tracing this thread of waiting for what we long for, acknowledging that there are real times when we're not feeling joy and can't sometimes ever remember how joy might return. But again, Advent asks us to reconsider what joy truly is and where it might be found. Because the joy Advent speaks of is not limited to the obvious places. It doesn't always arrive wrapped in ease or success, or getting what we think we want. Sometimes it appears when we least expect it, as in landscapes that look unpromising, in lives that feel unsettled and perhaps chaotic, in moments that don't seem particularly joyful at first glance. Isaiah 35 speaks directly into that kind of circumstance. It offers a vision of joy that comes not only in celebration, but in transformation, not just at the destination, but along the way. And it invites us to ask, as we listen and to reflect together, what kind of joy are we really looking for, and where will we find it? In these last few weeks, as we've traveled through Isaiah, it's clear that the people of Israel are not celebrating. They're weary. They're anxious. They're living with the consequences of being in exile and of what they have lost of their way of life and of what they held dear. Their world has been shaken and their confidence is thin. They've experienced the consequences of some of their own behavior, and they know what it is to feel far from home, geographically, spiritually, emotionally. And into that reality, Isaiah speaks again words that would have been startling to his hearers. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom like the crocus. The wilderness, the desert, the dry land. These are images that are real. They are images that are familiar to the people. They describe places where life struggles to survive. Places where you don't expect colour or abundance. Places where you ration water and lower your expectations of what you might see. Many of us know some of those landscapes well, even if we've never set foot in an actual desert. Because there can be emotional deserts, spiritual deserts, relationship deserts, seasons when prayer feels dry, when joy feels distant, when hope feels like something we remember rather than what we're experiencing now. Isaiah doesn't deny those deserts exist, and God does not pretend that the wilderness is something else. Instead, God speaks into it. The desert and the parched land, Isaiah says, will be glad. And again, like hope, like peace, it's not naive optimism. It's not wishful thinking. This is a promise rooted in the character of God. Advent joy doesn't come from pretending that things are fine. It comes from trusting that God is faithful even when things are not fine. And Isaiah goes on, the wilderness will rejoice and blossom. It will burst into bloom. It will rejoice greatly and shout for joy. Notice the abundance here. It's not just survival. It's not just getting by. There's rejoicing, shouting for joy, life where there was once barrenness. This is Advent language. Because Advent, as I've said, is not about escaping the wilderness or the hard things in our lives. It's about God coming to transform it where we are. And Isaiah turns from the landscape to the people walking through it. And he says, strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear. Your God will come. He will come to save you. This is a wonderful passage. God notices weak hands. God sees shaking knees. God hears fearful hearts. They're not rebuked. They're met with compassion. And so Advent joy begins with that reassurance. Be strong, do not fear. Not because everything will instantly make sense, not because the journey will suddenly get easy, but because your God sees and your God will come. And that sentence sits at the very heart of Advent. Your God will come. Not remain distant, not stay silent, not abandon his people to figure it out alone. God comes. And when God comes, Isaiah says, things begin to change. The eyes of the blind are opened, the ears of the deaf are unstopped, the lame leap like a deer, the tongue of the speechless shout for joy. Not just poetic images, promises. Promise that God's presence brings restoration. That joy is not just an emotional, but a deeply physical, relational, and communal reality. When we hear these words in Advent, we cannot help but think of Jesus. Because when Jesus begins his ministry, these are exactly the signs that follow him. Blind eyes see. Deaf ears hear. The lame walk. Those silenced by shame or exclusion find their voice again. When John the Baptist sends messengers to ask Jesus if he truly is the one to come, Jesus doesn't offer some clever answer. He says, go and tell John what you hear and see. In other words, if you know your scriptures, you will see that Isaiah 35 is happening in your midst. Jesus is the fulfillment of this promise because he brings God's restoring presence into the world. But notice something equally important. Jesus doesn't heal everyone. Not every desert blooms immediately, and not every sorrow disappears. And yet, joy has arrived. Because in Jesus, God's future has broken into the present. Advent joy is not the denial of our suffering, it's the assurance that suffering will not have the final word. Isaiah then introduces this another powerful image. A highway will be there. A highway. And it will be called the way of holiness. It's not a hidden path for the spiritually elite. It's not a route reserved for the strong or the impressive. It's a pilgrim road. A way home for those who have been scattered. A path for the weary and the wounded. A road marked not by perfection, but by grace. Advent reminds us again that we are a pilgrim people. We live between promise and fulfillment. We walk with joy and sorrow side by side. We see glimpses of healing, and we carry on longing for more. And yet, as we walk on, we know that the road has been opened. And Isaiah's clear, the road is safe. No lion shall be there, nor any ravenous beast. That doesn't mean that life is free from danger or pain. It does mean that nothing has the power to ultimately destroy God's people. And Jesus fulfills this by becoming the way himself. I am the way, he says. Not simply a guide pointing in the direction, but the road under our feet. He walks ahead of us, he walks beside us, and by his Spirit, he walks within us. And so the chapter ends with a vision of arrival. Only the redeemed will walk there, and those the Lord has rescued will return. They will enter Zion with singing, and everlasting joy will crown their heads. That's the joy that has endured the journey. They've known exile, they've known wilderness, they've known fear and fatigue, and now they arrive singing. Not because the road was easy, but because God was faithful. And then there's this wonderful verse. Gladness and joy will overtake them. You won't have to look for it. Suddenly, it's right there in front of you, overtaken. What a beautiful phrase. Sorrow and sighing will be no more. That captures so much of human experience. The deep griefs that we carry, the quiet weariness that sometimes settles on us. Advent joy doesn't shame those sighs, but it promises that they won't last forever. Jesus fulfills the promise not only by coming once in Bethlehem, but by promising to come again. And we live in the middle of the story. Jesus is among us by his Spirit. He still transforms lives that have been bruised, broken, and left like a desert. And that transformation happens on the way that he has made. The desert begins to bloom. Can you see that that started? The road has been opened. Are we walking on it? Joy is ours even while sorrow still exists. And so we wait with hope because we know how the story ends. So if this Advent, if you find yourself joyful, give thanks. And if you find yourself weary with weak hands and unsteady knees, hear these words spoken gently to you. Be strong. Do not fear. Your God will come. He already has. And because of Jesus, we're confident that the wilderness will rejoice. The road will lead us home, and joy, real lasting joy, is on the way. And in the meantime, we can know an increasing measure of joy because we know Jesus, and we can be sure of God's love for us through him because we've placed ourselves in his hand and are walking on his way.